Imagine the tension in a Cairo hotel room, Egypt, during the crisp early days of December 1943, where President Franklin D. Roosevelt, his hand trembling slightly over a blank sheet of paper, was on the verge of penning a decision that would reshape the entire trajectory of World War II, deliberately benching America's most ferocious and battle-hardened general, George S. Patton, from commanding the monumental D-Day invasion, and instead handing the reins of Operation Overlord to Dwight D. Eisenhower, a brilliant strategist whose hands had never gripped a rifle in actual combat. This pivotal World War II command choice, often debated as one of the war's greatest what-ifs, wasn't born from doubt in Patton's tactical genius but from a profound understanding of supreme leadership's intricate equation. Where organizational mastery, diplomatic finesse, and coalition building trumped sheer battlefield aggression to secure Allied victory and liberate Europe from the iron grip of Nazi oppression. In this deep dive into why Patton didn't lead D-Day, we'll unravel the riveting biographies of Patton, Eisenhower, and George C. Marshall, dissect the infamous slapping incidents that threatened to torpedo Patton's career, explore the high-stakes conferences that sealed the fate of Overlord, and reveal how Roosevelt's visionary foresight orchestrated a command structure that not only won the war but redefined modern military strategy for generations to come, to truly grasp the magnitude of this decision. We must journey back to the sun-scorched battlefields of North Africa, where the triumphant conclusion of the Tunisian campaign in May 1943 marked a turning point with the mass surrender of an astonishing 267,000 Axis troops, catapulting Lieutenant General George S. Patton Jr. into the spotlight as the embodiment of American military might, a name that sent shivers down the spines of German commanders and inspired awe among Allied forces. At the age of 57, Patton wasn't just a general, he was a living legend, striding across the desert in his meticulously tailored uniforms adorned with brilliantly polished brass buttons that caught the relentless sun like beacons of defiance, his hips holstered with those legendary twin ivory-handled revolvers that were far more than mere props, they were extensions of his lethal precision. Tools he had proven in bloody encounters. His language was as sharp and unfiltered as a bayonet, capable of making even the saltiest sailors wince, while his volcanic temper could whip subordinates into a frenzy of motivation or fear, and his revolutionary tactical acumen allowed him to dismantle enemy formations with a velocity that shattered traditional warfare paradigms, turning what should have been drawn-out sieges into lightning-fast routes. Patton's origins trace back to November 11, 1885, in the picturesque valleys of San Gabriel, California, born into a storied family steeped in martial heritage, with tales of ancestors who charged into the fray during the Revolutionary War and bled on the fields of the Civil War, his own grandfather meeting a heroic end as a Confederate colonel at the Third Battle of Winchester. Instilling in young George an unquenchable thirst for glory and a deep-seated identity as a warrior destined to etch his name in history's annals, from his earliest days, Patton battled invisible foes like undiagnosed dyslexia, a hurdle that made scholarly pursuits a grueling ordeal in an era when such conditions were misunderstood and untreated. Yet he countered this with an unbreakable resolve and an obsessive drive that propelled him forward. After a formative year at the Virginia Military Institute honing his discipline, he entered the hallowed halls of West Point in 1904, where academic rigors forced him to repeat his freshman year, but his perseverance paid off as he graduated on June 11, 1909, securing the 46th spot in a class of 103 cadets, his fiery spirit and unrelenting competitiveness already distinguishing him as a force to be reckoned with among his contemporaries. Post-graduation, Patton's path veered into the realms of international athleticism and high society. He represented the United States in the 1912 Stockholm Olympics modern pentathlon, clinching a respectable fifth place despite a contentious pistol shooting score that many argued deserved higher honors. An experience that fortified his ethos of personal excellence and convinced him that America's warriors must rival the world's finest in every arena. His union with Beatrice Eyre, the daughter of a prosperous Massachusetts industrialist, not only enriched his life with love and support but also opened doors through social connections and financial means, accelerating his ascent in military circles and providing the stability to pursue his ambitious visions. Patton's baptism by fire arrived in 1916 amid the dusty chaos of the Pancho Villa expedition into Mexico, where as a young lieutenant and aide to Brigadier General John J. Pershing, he orchestrated a groundbreaking motorized raid against Villa's bandits, personally dispatching 2 adversaries with his signature ivory-handled revolvers and dramatically strapping their lifeless forms to the hoods of his vehicles for a victorious parade back to base camp, a brutal spectacle that captured national headlines. Hailing him as the inaugural American officer to harness motorized vehicles in combat and forging an indelible bond with Pershing, who would champion Patton's career for years to come. When the United States plunged into World War I in 1917, Patton crossed the Atlantic with Pershing to France, where he unearthed his true vocation in the nascent field of armored warfare, embracing the tank, a clunky, temperamental invention that most dismissed as a novelty, but which Patton visionary grasped as the future of battle. He single-handedly established the United States Tank School at Langres, authoring comprehensive training manuals and operational protocols from scratch, meticulously studying French tank strategies, interrogating British commanders for insights, and innovating American approaches that emphasized blistering speed and audacious offensives over cautious maneuvers. Culminating in the brutal Meuse-Argonne offensive of September 1918, Patton fearlessly led his fledgling tank corps into the inferno, advancing on foot amid whistling bullets until a machine gun round felled him, an act of valor that bestowed upon him the Distinguished Service Cross and cemented his enduring reputation for unflinching bravery under the most harrowing fire. The interwar period of the 1920s and 1930s saw Patton evolve into one of the U.S. Army's foremost prophets of mechanized warfare, tirelessly publishing scholarly articles, spearheading experimental trials, and vociferously lobbying for the recognition of fast-moving armored divisions as the key to future victories, even as conservative brass and fiscal austerity relegated tanks to mere infantry support roles. His collaboration with Major Dwight D. Eisenhower, whom he encountered in 1919 while tinkering with tank designs, blossomed into a fruitful partnership despite their contrasting temperaments, Patton's flamboyant intensity complementing Eisenhower's measured pragmatism, as they jointly authored groundbreaking doctrines that challenged the status quo, though their radical proposals often met with resistance from a military establishment wary of costly overhauls. Undeterred, Patton diversified his innovations, designing the iconic M1913 cavalry saber, forever dubbed the Patton Saber, to preserve offensive mobility in an era of rapid technological change, while continually authoring treatises on cavalry tactics that underscored his unwavering commitment to dynamic, aggressive warfare. As the storm clouds of global conflict gathered over Europe in 1940, Patton's long-awaited renaissance began. Elevated to brigadier general in October, he assumed command of an armored brigade, infusing his troops with the hard-won tactics he had refined over 2 decades, and founding the expansive Desert Training Center in California's unforgiving Mojave Desert. A sprawling proving ground where soldiers endured grueling simulations mirroring North African hardships, emerging as hardened warriors under Patton's exacting standards that bordered on the merciless but yielded unparalleled combat readiness. The crucible of Operation Torch in November 1942 thrust Patton into the global arena, commanding the Western Task Force's 35,000-strong amphibious assault on Morocco's shores, the first major American thrust against Axis powers, where he navigated treacherous seas, Vichy French defenses, and logistical nightmares to secure beachheads and topple Casablanca in a mere 3 days, a feat that not only propelled him to lieutenant general but also earned him the prestigious Order of Wissam Alaouite from Morocco's Sultan, whose citation poetically declared in French that, "the lions in their dens tremble at his approach," a testament to Patton's commanding presence and operational brilliance in executing intricate landings that proved American forces could hold their own in the theater of war. Yet, triumph gave way to turmoil following the humiliating American setback at Kasserine Pass in February 1943, where Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's Afrika Korps inflicted over 6,000 casualties and decimated equipment under the faltering leadership of Major General Lloyd Fredendall. Summoned to salvage the wreckage, Patton assumed command of 2 corps on March 6, 1943, and unleashed a whirlwind of reforms, enforcing rigid uniform codes requiring helmets and full attire even in rear areas, imposing meticulous schedules and surprise inspections, and crisscrossing his domain to engage soldiers directly, scrutinize gear, and fortify positions while mandating proactive patrols and offensive mindsets even in defensive postures. The transformation was electric. Troops adopted sharper postures, crisper responses, and fiercer resolve, bolstered by Patton's strategic appointment of Major General Omar N. Bradley as deputy, whose unflappable competence perfectly balanced Patton's explosive dynamism, rebuilding 2 corps into a formidable machine that repelled German assaults at El Getter in late March, affirming that with proper discipline, training, and inspiration, American soldiers could outmatch seasoned Wehrmacht veterans, and validating Patton's lifelong philosophies on leadership and warfare. Patton's legend reached new heights during the July 1943 Sicily campaign, codenamed Operation Husky, where he helmed the 7th Army's 90,000 troops storming the island's southern beaches on July 10, initially tasked with shielding the flank of British General Bernard Montgomery's 8th Army en route to Messina, but Patton, ever the maverick, refused a supporting role, seizing Montgomery's stagnation near Catania as his cue to unleash a blistering westward offensive that captured Palermo on July 22 in a stunning display of velocity that bewildered allies and adversaries alike. Pivoting eastward along Sicily's northern coast, Patton ignited a high-stakes race against Montgomery, pushing his exhausted forces relentlessly to claim Messina on August 17, mere hours ahead of the British, in a conquest that, while strategically debatable for allowing German escapes, conquered Sicily in just 38 days with Allied casualties around 24,850, effectively ejecting Italy from the Axis alliance and prying open Mediterranean sea lanes for vital Allied convoys. However, this crowning achievement was eclipsed by a pair of infamous outbursts that exposed Patton's darker impulses and nearly extinguished his career. On August 3, 1943, at the 15th Evacuation Hospital near Nicosia, he encountered Private Charles H. Cole, a 26-year-old from Indiana diagnosed with battle fatigue sans visible injuries, and in a fit of rage deeming it cowardice, Patton slapped Cole with his gloves, berated him as a weakling, and demanded his immediate return to the front, leaving medical staff aghast though the incident was initially contained within channels. Undeterred, 7 days later at the 93rd Evacuation Hospital, Patton confronted 21-year-old Private Paul G. Bennett, a 4-year combat veteran broken by shelling, slapping him twice, dislodging his helmet liner, and brandishing a revolver while threatening execution for perceived cowardice, ordering doctors to send him back or charge him, an atrocity that prompted horrified reports cascading through medical hierarchies to Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, who safeguarded them out of loyalty, but others reached General Dwight D. Eisenhower on August 16, forcing a reckoning with Patton's indispensable talents against his egregious violations of military conduct and human dignity. Eisenhower, grappling with the dilemma of retaining the Allies' premier combat commander amid such flagrant abuses, opted for a measured response, a scathing August 17 letter condemning Patton's brutality, abuse of the afflicted, and temper tantrums before subordinates, mandating personal apologies to the victims, witnesses, and every division under his command. A mortifying ordeal Patton fulfilled by touring units, confessing his errors, and pleading for forgiveness, eliciting mixed reactions from soldiers who admired his candor or questioned his judgment. The scandals simmered in secrecy until November 21, 1943, when broadcaster Drew Pearson's radio expose ignited a firestorm of public outrage, polarizing Americans between those who championed Patton as a necessary hardliner in wartime and those decrying him as a brute unfit for leadership, pressuring Congress, Secretary of War Henry Stimson, and Chief of Staff George C. Marshall to defend or dismiss him amid the brewing deliberations over Overlord's command. This controversy intertwined with the destinies of two other titans, Dwight David Eisenhower, born October 14, 1890, in Denison, Texas, to a family of modest means where his father toiled as a creamery mechanic, raising young Dwight in Abilene, Kansas, amid financial humility far removed from Patton's affluent roots. Eisenhower pursued West Point not from martial zeal but for its tuition-free education. Graduating 61st in the illustrious 1915 class of 164, the class the stars fell on, producing 59 generals, yet his early trajectory hinted little at future eminence, marked by thwarted ambitions for combat glory. Eisenhower's initial post-war years brimmed with frustration, eager for frontline action in World War I. He was instead relegated to training tank crews at Camp Colt in Pennsylvania, excelling in organizational feats that readied thousands for battle but denying him overseas deployment. As the armistice arrived, leaving a void of unfulfilled generational right. Reverting to captain then advancing to major, his promotions lagged in the peacetime Army's stagnation, but pivotal experiences like the 1919 Transcontinental Motor Convoy, a grueling two-month odyssey exposing America's abysmal road infrastructure, solidified his conviction in mechanized forces' potential. Paralleling his budding friendship with Patton at Fort Meade, where late-night debates and joint experiments on tank warfare forged a bond amid shared rebuffs from traditionalists. The ensuing decades polished Eisenhower's staff expertise through elite assignments, topping his 1926 class of 275 at Fort Leavenworth's Command and General Staff School, serving as speechwriter and aide to the venerable General Pershing in crafting his memoirs, and absorbing coalition warfare wisdom under Brigadier General Fox Connor in Panama, who presciently warned of an impending global conflict fought alongside Britain and France. In 1933, Eisenhower endured the tempestuous role as aide to Army Chief of Staff Douglas MacArthur, mediating clashes with Congress and the Roosevelt administration, then accompanying him to the Philippines from 1935 to 1939 to fortify defenses amid political intrigue, honing invaluable lessons in diplomacy, compromise, and the interplay of military and political spheres that would prove indispensable in coalition command. As war erupted in Europe in 1939, Eisenhower's return stateside coincided with the Army's frantic expansion, his organizational prowess shining in the 1941 Louisiana maneuvers that demonstrated mechanized potential and drew the gaze of Chief of Staff George C. Marshall, who summoned him post-Pearl Harbor to devise Pacific strategies in exhaustive marathons, impressing with lucid plans that elevated him to War Plans Division head in February 1942. Advocating fiercely for a Europe First doctrine prioritizing Hitler's defeat, Eisenhower's holistic vision, balancing grand strategy with minutiae, rendered him Marshall's linchpin, culminating in his June 1942 appointment as European Theater Commander, a meteoric rise for a combat novice tasked with forging American bases in Britain, nurturing Anglo-American bonds, and plotting France's invasion. Eisenhower's diplomatic alchemy shone, cultivating ties with Winston Churchill, earning British brass's trust, and integrating multinational staffs in a unified headquarters, where his blend of firmness and flexibility fostered harmony. For Operation Torch in November 1942, Marshall anointed him Supreme Allied Commander. Navigating labyrinthine French loyalties, brokering ceasefires, and managing volatile figures like Admiral François Darla, delivering victory that burnished his credentials in coalition combat despite lacking personal battlefield scars. At the heart of this command saga stood George Catlett Marshall, born December 31, 1880, in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, to a family with Southern sympathies. His father, a Virginia businessman, relocated north, whose Virginia Military Institute tenure culminated in 1901 as top cadet, commissioning him into infantry for 15 years of unassuming assignments that quietly built his foundational skills. World War I unveiled Marshall's genius in staff logistics. Masterminding the 1st Infantry Division's movements, pivotal in Cantigny's May 1918 success and the Meuse-Argonne's colossal relocation of 600,000 troops and 2,700 guns under Pershing's wing, responsibilities eclipsing his rank. Post-war obscurity belied his influence, aide to Pershing, instructor at Fort Benning shaping future luminaries like Bradley and Ridgway, and staff roles compiling his famed Black Book of Promising Officers, including Eisenhower, all underscoring his integrity and talent-spotting acumen. Roosevelt's audacious 1939 leapfrog promotion over seniors installed Marshall as Chief of Staff on Poland's Invasion Day, transforming a diminutive 174,000-man force, outranked globally by Belgium, into a behemoth through savvy congressional lobbying for funds. Establishing training hubs, inducting millions, and boldly advancing merit over seniority. Marshall's diplomatic navigation extended to inter-service rivalries, Allied frictions, especially Churchill's soft underbelly, peripherals versus his adamant push for direct French assault, and securing Overlord's May 1944 slot at 1943's Cairo-Tehran summits, where Stalin pressed for commitments amid suspicions of delays. Marshall's Washington indispensability, orchestrating worldwide efforts, congressional alliances, and logistical miracles, clashed with his logical overlord candidacy, lauded by Churchill as the organizer of Allied victory, trusted by Stalin, and revered by Roosevelt. Yet his removal risked chaos, as Joint Chiefs like Admiral Ernest King argued no substitute existed for his multifaceted role. The Cairo-Tehran conferences crystallized Roosevelt's torment, honoring Marshall's merits against his irreplaceable hub function, dispatching Harry Hopkins to probe preferences, only for Marshall's selfless deference to presidential prerogative. In a December 5, 1943, private parley, Roosevelt's hedging yielded the revelation, "I feel I could not sleep at night with you out of the country," retaining Marshall stateside and appointing Eisenhower to Overlord on December 7, Pearl Harbor's anniversary, a terse note stunning Eisenhower, who anticipated Washington duties, but Marshall's memento dispatch affirmed the choice's profundity. Overlord's essence demanded Eisenhower's forte, not tactical wizardry but symphony-like coordination of 3,000,000 troops, 7,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft across nationalities, a logistical colossus where diplomatic navigation trumped combat flair. Eisenhower expanded the assault from 3 to 5 divisions for resilience. Wrangling resources amid shortages, placating Montgomery's command of initial ground forces despite American grumblings, and ingeniously deploying Patton, post-scandal, in Operation Fortitude's ruse as Fusag's phantom leader, a fictional army duping Germans via bogus radio chatter, inflatable decoys, and double agents into fixating on Pas-de-Calais, leveraging Patton's fearsome repute, Hitler's crazy cowboy general, Rommel's studied foe, to immobilize reserves for 7 post-D-Day weeks, granting Normandy's foothold invaluable breathing room. Patton, chafing on June 6 sidelines via BBC reports, confided anguish to wife Beatrice and son George, yet his spectral command yielded history's ironic triumph, a strategic masterstroke sans active engagement. Activating Third Army August 1, 1944, post-Cobra's Normandy breach, Patton unleashed decades-honed blitzkrieg, surging through Brittany, encircling Falaise, liberating Paris by August 25, amassing territories planners deemed 6-month feats in mere weeks, halted only by fuel scarcities amid Eisenhower's broad front strategy, sparking Patton's ire but aligning with coalition prudence. December's Ardennes offensive, Hitler's Bulge Gambit, tested Eisenhower's mettle. Containing the thrust, Eisenhower tasked Patton's 90-degree pivot to relieve besieged Bastogne, a fatuous timeline met via prescient planning, breaking through December 26 amid blizzards, eradicating the Bulge by January and dooming Germany's last gasp. Spring 1945 saw Third Army's Rhine crossings, Trier's cheeky capture, Ohrdruf's liberation exposing Nazi horrors, and V-Day tallies, 81,500 square miles freed, 1.28 million prisoners, 500,000 enemy casualties, with proportionate lower losses validating Patton's offensive ethos. This triumvirate, Marshall's global orchestration, Eisenhower's alliance alchemy, Patton's tactical thunder, embodied Roosevelt's sagacity. D-Day's victory stemmed from organizational supremacy, not individual heroics. Birthing modern tenets of joint, diplomatic warfare. Eisenhower's 1953–1961 presidency mirrored these virtues, navigating Cold War perils. Patton's 1945 Bavarian governorship sparked denazification flaps, culminating in a fatal December car crash at 60, interred humbly in Luxembourg amid his troops. Marshall's post-war envoy to China, Secretary of State crafting the 1947 Marshall Plan, $12 billion rebuilding Europe, thwarting communism, earning 1953's Nobel Peace Prize as history's sole soldier laureate, cemented his legacy until 1959's passing. Roosevelt's calibration, sidelining Patton's brilliance for Eisenhower's coordination, matched talents to exigencies, liberating Europe, vanquishing tyranny, and forging enduring peace, proving Supreme Command's calculus favors holistic mastery over isolated valor.